democracy without the protection of minority rights. For any society to be properly governed, to have good government also, there must be accountability. What is happening in Nigeria is robbery, is brigandage, it's not government. And it is the responsibility of writers like myself and other well-meaning people to fight it. And I believe that the international community is in a much better position to listen now.
The United Nations says this is just one of the places where decades of devastating environmental damage and pollution has been caused by the oil company Shell. It's Ogoni, in the heart of Nigeria's vast oil-producing region, filmed by our crew in June last year. The UN report released last week says it will cost $1 billion and 30 years to clean up the mess. But there's no chance of the Nigerian government revoking Shell's operating license because of the damage. More than 90% of the government's revenue comes from oil exports, giving oil companies like Shell tremendous political leverage. And local people say that even in light of the report, Shell, as it tries to clean up the mess, is still causing more damage and pollution to the area.
All the necessary requirements to create food surplus in any country exist here: a fertile land and a youthful population. Even if we discount the technical know-how for large-scale mechanized farming, still everything we need to make us the food basket of Africa exists within our shores. Yet a vast majority of our people cannot afford basic necessities like milk and potable water, except to purchase these items in sachets of smaller units. My point is, food sits amongst some of the most expensive things in this country. Away from what experts and economists have to say, some of us know that in the global south, there is a connection between the prevailing poverty of our people and the inability of many of them to get 3 square meals a day to the killing of people who represents voices of dissent in our continent. On this episode of Doppler Films Unspoken History series, and in memory of one of such voices of dissent, we examine the killing of Ken Saro-Wiwa and ask why it is that across Africa, anyone who takes a pro-people stance on issues bordering on resource exploration is either persecuted, demonized, or even killed. How does this pattern affect the fortunes of our people?
This government has always expressed its commitment to dialogue as a means of resolving our internal differences. We have demonstrated this by our individual and collective efforts at holding consultation at all strata of our society. You will recall that in spite of these overtures,
Ebi was only 11 when the late Nigerian dictator Sani Abacha ordered a military crackdown on Ogoni land in 1994. It occurs to me with sad nostalgia how the kids in those days would crowd late Ken Saro-Wiwa until he sat them down to tell them evening stories. Stories of the rich cultural heritage of his Ogoni people, how blessed their land is, and how the big foreign corporations, in active collaboration with corrupt government officials and local puppets, were ruining the place in a massive oil exploration enterprise. Ebi insisted that the massacre which former President Obasanjo ordered in the land of Odi in Bayelsa State in 1999, and in fact all the other massacres that have happened in Nigeria's recent history, are all child's play compared to what happened in Ogoni. Prior to the Ogoni operation, 4 elderly Ogoni chiefs, known to be opponents of Saro-Wiwa's Mossop, had been gruesomely murdered. General Abacha blamed Mossop for their deaths. Scores were arrested, including Ken Saro-Wiwa, one Barry Kobel, and 7 others. Koibel was not part of MOSOP, but was a senior government official who had been critical of the military government of the time. For many days, kids were separated from their parents in the thick forest around Ogoni into which they had all fled. For survival, they fed on wild fruits and any edible thing they could find. They drank from whatever stream they came across, and that was how they lived for weeks. The entire Ogoni land was depleted. Youths were killed, women were raped irrespective of age, and the communities were plundered. And in the end, for a land as strategic in oil exploration as Ogoni land, a people that had suffered so much injustice in terms of land degradation, water and air pollution, human rights abuses, and poverty, the government decided that what they needed the most was not schools, hospitals or roads, but the construction of the biggest prison facility, perhaps in all of Niger Delta area, and they built one for them. A few questions come to mind from merely listening to a big story. How did Nigeria come to a point where a government, in attempt to solve what it called a crime, would decide to order a crackdown on a town within its own territory? How did the West, the acclaimed custodian of civilization, democracy and morality, not see the rightness in the cause for which Saro-Wiwa fought, for which his life was forfeit? Are we to believe that the West could not, in all honesty, stop the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 9? Why haven't we seen a real commitment over the years to change both on the part of the Nigerian government and the Western multinationals in Nigeria's Niger Delta region today? Despite the fact that a United Nations Environmental Program report later validated Saro-Wiwa's claim about how the oil companies were devastating Ogoni environment. Why is there always war, unrest, injustice and terrorism, death and bloodshed in any place across Africa and perhaps in other places of the world where resources that are useful to the West are discovered?
We now have a devastated environment in the Delta among the ethnic minorities. I leave for Nigeria tomorrow, and the Ogoni people are now fully mobilized to demand their rights of the government of Nigeria. In 1990, in the summer of 1990, they sent a Bill of Rights to the federal government and to the people of the country, demanding certain things, particularly autonomy, the freedom to administer themselves, the freedom to use their resources for their own good, the freedom to control their environment and to stop the devastation of the environment by shell.
The story of Kenule Beeson Saro-Wiwa, popularly known as Ken, a Nigerian writer, television producer, environmental activist, and winner of many awards, including one for exemplary courage in striving non-violently for civil, economic, and environmental rights, was an eventful one. And 28 years after, the story reflects what many Africans are facing, fighting for a better deal for their people. Born in October 1941 as the eldest son in a prominent family in Ogoni, in today's Rivers State, Nigeria, Saro-Wiwa had pursued a career in academics before landing a job as a civilian administrator during the Biafran War of 1967 to 1970. He would later join the Rivers State government as Regional Commissioner for Education, from where he was dismissed because of his consistent advocacy for a greater Ogoni autonomy. Ken went on to become a businessman, a novelist, and a television producer. His long-running satirical TV series, Bassi & Co., was purported to be the most watched soap opera in Africa. In the 1970s, he built a business in real estate, and in the 1980s, he concentrated on his writing, journalism, and television production. But throughout his works, he never took his face off the exploitation he saw around him, as the oil and gas industry took riches from beneath the feet of his people, and in return left their lands polluted and the citizens disenfranchised. In one of his works, Ninth Ride, he explained his anger at seeing multinational oil companies like Shell appropriating lands from local peoples. I cursed the heads for spouting oil, the black gold. I cursed the gods for not drying the oil wells. Why can't the lawmakers revise the laws just to bring a little bit more happiness to these unhappy wretches whom the search for oil has reduced to an animal existence, he lamented. In 1990, Saro-Wiwa co-founded the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, MOSOP, and started to dedicate himself to the amelioration of the problem of the oil-producing regions of the Niger Delta. Focusing on his homeland Ogoni, he launched a non-violent movement for social and economical justice. In this role, he accused the oil companies and the Nigerian government of waging an ecological war against Ogoni and precipitating the genocide of the Ogoni people. It was so effective that by 1993, the oil companies had to pull out of Ogoni land. This triumph turned Saro-Wiwa and his acolytes into a real menace for General Sani Abacha's military dictatorship and the foreign-owned multinational companies. Abacha responded to the MOSOP protests with force, committing numerous human rights violations, including killings, torture, and rape in the process. Both Shell and the Nigerian government wanted to get rid of Ken and his brothers at all costs, because at the time, Shell was pumping almost 1 billion barrels of crude oil a day. Roughly half of Nigeria's total daily oil production and exports at the time made up some 96% of the country's foreign earnings. Saro-Wiwa and his brothers were tortured, deprived of family members and friends, and their deaths by hanging also deprived their various families the rights to family lives as well. The government even went as far as bribing prosecution witnesses to frame Saro-Wiwa and his men when attempts to bribe Saro-Wiwa himself failed. Up to this very moment, the level of injustice in the Niger Delta can better be imagined. Even the just concluded government of General Buhari, who spent 8 years in office from 2015 to 2023, did little or nothing to reverse the trend in the Niger Delta, least of all exonerate Saro-Wiwa, who was unjustly killed. As a matter of fact, Ahmed Ali, one of those who sat on the panel that condemned Saro-Wiwa, was the head of the Nigerian customs, while Professor Gambari, who justified the killing to the international community, was General Buhari's chief of staff. Whether Nigeria's new president Tinubu will do the needful as regards justice for Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 9 remains to be seen. Africa is not poor. Nigeria is not either. Both are being looted, after those who should speak for their people are either persecuted, demonized, exiled, or even killed like Saro-Wiwa. This is why food, a basic necessity, is so difficult to come by for many in Africa, because those who should negotiate better deals on behalf of the people often get taken out, and those who take them out do so on the instruction of their foreign overlords and at the expense of the well-being of the majority of the real owners of the wealth. These people will do anything to silence dissent, and this is what happened to Saro-Wiwa, a man who, like many activists, should have been the rallying point for our various peoples. A recent report claimed that sub-Saharan Africa is a net creditor to the West to the tune of $41 billion. Yet, $203 billion is leaving the African continent annually through Dutch tax and outright stealing from the multinational companies and their conniving local collaborators. Even the profits that these multinational companies make here are sent back to their home country, especially the United Kingdom, which is awash with profits and resources extracted from Africa through the sweat and the blood of our people. illegal lodging, fishing, oil bunkering, wildlife trading, and so on are just a few means by which billions of dollars are being stolen from Africa on a yearly basis. And these are monies that should provide a better life for the people. The combination of a staggering wealth in terms of human and natural resources, rampant violence and corruption, and abject poverty of Africans is not a coincidence, but a pattern. How can Africans be this rich and yet our people live in abject penury? Experts say the wholesale expropriation of resources since the time of slave trade through colonialism has not slowed down or altered. In Nigeria, for example, when the colonial masters were living, they made sure to hand power to a corrupt extractor elite, a cabal that has been transforming itself over the years to align with contemporary context, a group that wields both commercial and political power and continue to draw to itself the rent that oil and other resources generate at the expense of the people whose land these resources are in the first place. And anybody with a voice who dares to question them is liquidated. Then if we consider the stifling loans, the negative narrative that Africa needs help, the wars that are being fought within African shores using weapons made in peaceful countries, we realize that Saro-Wiwa grossly underestimated the powers he was up against, and he even committed the grave error of trusting them. These are powers that feed on the blood of weaker nations for survival. While praying for the continued repose of Ken Saro-Wiwa's soul and that of the Ogoni 9, let me ask this question. Why is it that our leaders, who themselves are product of adversity, 60 years on after independence, choose to or allow themselves to be used by foreign interest groups to perpetuate the same adversities that they are so familiar with growing up on their own people? Reflect on these questions for now until we meet again in our next episode of Doppler Films on Spoken History series.
If you've enjoyed this video and like to see more content like this, please help support our growth by giving a thumbs up, subscribing to our YouTube channel, following our various social media handles, and please do send us a little donation to help us continue making more content like this.